Hi, my name is Shan, and I'm a PhD student here at Oxford. My research focuses on sleep, and in this video I'm going to give you an introduction into sleep science, how we study sleep, and also give you some tips on how you can improve your sleep. So in this video, I will be going over how sleep researchers like me study sleep. I will also be discussing the benefits of getting a good night's sleep and why sleep is so important. I will also be giving you some tips and some resources on how you can improve your sleep. So when I talk about sleep, you may think of something a bit like what this cat is doing. It's lying down, it's still, it has its eyes closed, and it's something we are all familiar with, and it's something we all do, or at least I hope you do. And in fact, every living creature we studied sleeps in some way, even if it's not in the traditional sense, they will sleep. But sleep is not just a period of time in which our body shuts off entirely. There's actually a lot more going on underneath the surface. So with this in mind, what do you think the function of sleep is? Why do we do it in the first place? Pause the video for a couple minutes and think about what you think the purpose of sleep is. Some of the functions you may have thought of as sleep may have included regeneration and restoration, in the sense that sleep gives our bodies time to repair itself from the damage done to it whilst we're awake. And it's true that we often feel refreshed after a good night's sleep. You may have thought of memory consolidation, so the process of forming new memories or learning. And it's true that insufficient sleep can result in the inability to remember things and can result in poor concentration, which can then affect our ability to learn new things. Or maybe you thought that it's just the way we evolved, it's nothing more than evolution. Maybe our survival depended on us having these periods of inactivity, such as to avoid predators. Or maybe you thought that sleep is used to conserve energy, as it's a time where we're just laying around and not doing much. We're very inactive during this period, so we're just conserving our energy. But the truth is, we don't know. While there is some evidence for all of those examples, we don't know what the true purpose of sleep is or what exactly it's doing. It could be doing all of these things, plus other functions, or it could be doing none of them. One thing we definitely do know though is that sleep is very important for us, and getting poor quality sleep or not enough sleep can impact both our long-term and short-term health. And because there is so much we don't know about sleep, despite it being so important, there is a whole field dedicated to the scientific study of sleep, and that's where sleep researchers like me come in. So this brings us to Hans Berger, who was a German psychiatrist, and he lived between 1873 and 1941. And he really revolutionised sleep research because he developed a technique known as the EEG. And EEG stands for electroencephalography, where electro means electricity, encephalo means relating to the brain, and graphy means the study of. So essentially it's a study of electrical activity in the brain. And Hans first used this technique in 1924 to take the first ever recording of electrical brain activity. And this was pretty astounding as it gave scientists a chance to look into what the brain was doing for the very first time. And importantly, it showed that the brain is highly active during sleep, and it doesn't just shut off like had originally been thought. And the EEG allowed us to better characterise what is going on during sleep, and it's still used today to answer questions about the role of sleep. So when we conduct a sleep study nowadays, we don't just measure brain activity. We measure things such as movement, breathing rate, heart rate, and even snoring. And this is called a polysomnography, which roughly means a study of multiple things during sleep. And this setup can be used during research to better understand sleep, or it can be used clinically to diagnose people with sleep disorders such as insomnia. So here are some examples of what the EEG measurements look like. And the waves correspond to the electrical activity in the brain, and the pattern of how the waves look can be used to characterise the different stages of sleep. As the image shows the EEG traces during wake and during the two sleep stages, non-REM and REM. So REM stands for rapid eye movement sleep, and it's called this because the eyes move rapidly back and forth underneath the eyelids during this sleep stage. And REM sleep is when dreaming occurs. So when your alarm goes off in the morning and you wake up and you're midway through a dream, you are probably in REM sleep. Non-REM sleep stands for non-rapid eye movement sleep. And this is because you don't get the eyes moving underneath the eyelids during this stage. And non-REM is actually the majority of the sleep. It makes up 70 to 75% of the total sleep out. And it's usually thought of as the deep and restorative stage of sleep. So pause the video and look to see if there are any similarities or differences in the brain activity that you can spot during the different stages of wake, non-REM and REM. And also think about, how do you think looking at the different stages of sleep can tell us more about someone's sleep? So during wake, the brain waves are very fast and chaotic. And this is because we are thinking during wake, we are processing lots of information, and the brain activity reflects this. Whereas during non-REM sleep, the brainwaves slow down and the waves become much bigger. And this is sometimes called slow wave activity. And the bigger and slower these waves, the deeper the sleep. And this is thought to be a restorative method after we've had insufficient sleep. And then during REM, the brainwaves become much faster and they can actually look very similar to that of wake. And sometimes the only way to tell the differences between REM sleep and wake is to look at movement. And this is because the brain activity is so similar, but during REM sleep, the muscles become completely paralysed, whereas during wake, you're moving or you have at least some muscle tone, even if you aren't moving around. So sleep researchers can look at the proportion of time spent in each stage of sleep, and this can tell us about the sleep quality, how deep the sleep is, and whether there's anything unusual going on. So in this way, EEGs can be very informative. So although we don't know why we sleep, we do know that not getting enough of it is bad for our health. Just think about the last time you stayed up late or had to get up early. How did you feel the next day? How well were you able to concentrate? So there are many benefits of getting good sleep. So some of these include having improved mood and reduced stress. So just feeling tired can really negatively affect our mood and can make us feel easily overwhelmed. Sleep can also lead to better concentration and increase our ability to take in new information. Sleep also helps to boost our immune system, and getting enough sleep will mean that you won't get sick as often. And then in the long term, sleep can help to keep your heart healthy, and it can also help to reduce the risk of developing metabolic disorders. So as you can see, we can all benefit from getting enough sleep. So maybe think twice next time you're tempted to pull an all-nighter. I've given a brief overview of why sleep is good for us and the benefits of sleep. But what happens if we don't sleep? And a really interesting case to look into is that of Randy Gardner. Now, back in 1964, a 17-year-old Randy Gardner took part in an experiment to look at the effects of lack of sleep. And during this experiment, he was kept awake for 11 days and 25 minutes, setting the record for the longest period of time anyone had gone without sleeping. And over the course of the experiment, Randy's sense of smell and taste were affected. He struggled to stand, to balance, to walk. His speech became slurred. He struggled to do basic cognitive tasks and would often forget what he was doing halfway through. And this showed the severe impairment to brain function that's caused by a lack of sleep. And this is obviously a very extreme example. Most people aren't going to stay awake for 11 days. But if we aren't getting enough sleep on a daily basis over a long period of time, this results in a chronic sleep deprivation, and we start to see very similar impairments to our body's ability to function optimally. So I hope I've convinced you that sleep is really good for us and that we can get these health benefits by getting a good night's sleep. But how do we improve our sleep? Well, thanks to sleep research, we actually know of a number of ways we can improve our sleep, and this is what we call sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is the process of implementing or removing certain behaviours in order to improve our sleep. And it may actually be worth implementing some of these into your bedtime routine to see whether you notice any differences. So a good way to start is by keeping a sleep diary. And this allows you to track the time you go to bed and the time you get up each day and the amount of time you sleep each night, as well as your mood in the following day. And it can also be a really good way of identifying habits or activities that may be interfering with your sleep. And sleep diaries are actually very commonly used in sleep research and for the clinical diagnosis of sleep disorders, because they usually highlight some very easy changes that can be made to improve your sleep. And a link to the NHS sleep diary can be found in the additional resources if you would like to have a go at tracking your sleep. So, one of the biggest factors that impairs our ability to sleep or can decrease the quality of the sleep we get is the use of electronic devices such as phones, laptops, TVs in the hour before bed. And this is because these devices, they emit light, and specifically they emit blue light. And this light is very similar to that which is given off by sunlight. So your brain mistakes the device for sun. And this signals to your brain that it's daytime, it's time to be active and alert and be up and doing things, rather than it being time to go to sleep. And this can really make it difficult to actually fall asleep. So it's also recommended that you don't consume anything high in sugar or caffeine, such as tea or coffee, before bed. And this graph here, shown on this slide, is some data from a study from 2013 in which they looked at the effects of giving people caffeine either 0 hours before bed, 3 hours before bed, or 6 hours before bed, compared to a substance which didn't contain caffeine, which was the placebo. And they found that those who had had caffeine slept less than the people who hadn't had caffeine. And this was regardless of whether it was the group which had the caffeine just before bed or whether then the group which had the caffeine 6 hours before bed. They all slept significantly less than the control group. So they slept about an hour less compared to those which hadn't had caffeine. And although losing an hour's sleep might not sound like a lot, but this can really add up over time, which can lead to then chronic sleep deprivation. And this can have some really negative effects on your health. And also, some other studies have shown that caffeine actually reduces the quality of the sleep that you're getting. So you have reduced sleep and reduced quality of sleep. So you won't be getting all those health benefits. So to summarise, so we know that sleep is doing a lot of things and it's really important for our health. But despite this, we don't know the exact function or purpose of sleep. But we can study sleep by measuring the brain activity using an EEG. And finally, we can all benefit from getting enough sleep, and we can improve our sleep by having good sleep hygiene. So, what next? Now that we've discussed the benefits of getting enough sleep, why not try keeping a sleep diary and see whether you can identify any habits that may be interfering with your sleep? And maybe then try to improve your sleep hygiene by addressing any of these habits you've identified in your sleep diary. And then finally, check out the extra resources to learn more about sleep science and the function of sleep.